Right, from on that conversation, we're joined now by Director and Portfolio Manager at Denker Capital Kokkie Kooyman. Kokkie, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. A multinational bank in the UK, Standard Chartered, admitting liability for manipulating the rand and agreeing to pay a fine of 42 million rands. Others are saying, well, this means that, yes, indeed, the banks were manipulating the rand. But two, not just one bank, but more banks could have been involved. And the fact that this particular bank has agreed to testify means we are closer to actually finding all the culprits. How do you analyze what's the development been?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting that Standard Chartered actually admitted. But I think there are a couple of things and that need to be borne in mind here, and that's there's a lot of confusion being sown with words being used like manipulation. Firstly, bear in mind that nothing has been proven yet. And so I can't really comment, except what generally was found in similar situation in other markets overseas is that the instances we're referring to were individual traders who were trying to affect the spot rate of a currency to benefit a client. And by benefiting the client, they would obviously themselves benefit by better incentives or to get a better rate or to manipulate the rate. But we're talking of generally in all these cases and in investigations in other countries of individual traders. We're referring to banks the whole time. This is not the bank like Standard Chartered bank actively trying to manipulate the currency. It was often the case of individuals. Secondly, it is for specific trades. The currency markets are just so liquid and so big. It is impossible for even JP Morgan, which is the largest bank in the world, to actually affect the currency for quite a long time and even for a day, because other players in the market would immediately step in and use that mispricing. So all the talk of manipulation and of cabinet coming out with saying that the banks are actively trying to manipulate the currency, that simply is impossible. If you thirdly look at the way currencies trade, yesterday, for instance, had a quick look. The rand was down 1%, and immediately I look at the 40 other currencies we follow, and most of those currencies were also down 1%. Why? Because the dollar was actually stronger. So generally it is the dollar or something that happens in America that affects a lot of currencies, including the rand. Over time, the rand and other currencies follow the inflation differentials with the currencies they trade with. So, I mean, that's just as background. But sure, I think it definitely seems as if there were individual traders who were fixing rates different from what the market was allowing or doing. And I think it's good that those investigations are continuing, and those individuals and the banks for which they worked will be sanctioned and fined.
So, I mean, if we go along that train of thought, what would it mean? Because the big issue is the minister says currency manipulation was done or engineered to collapse the economy. Now, a large country manipulating currency of a small country, what would be the effect of that? Because one, it should affect the interest rates and capital accumulation.
Yeah. I mean, it is actually an absurd idea that banks or another country would manipulate the currencies of other countries. And occasionally it can be done. Let's say China as a country or America as a country was to decide to influence the rand, conceptually it could be done. I can just see why they would do it systemically over a long period. I mean, markets like, let's say, the gold market can be cornered, And occasionally there have been cases where George Soros very famously in the 1970s attacked the British pound because the British governors or the Bank of England was trying to keep the pound high, and everybody knew they didn't have reserves. So there have been cases where individual speculators with a lot of capital attack the currency, but generally the currencies follow the trends over many years of their inflation differentials. And I mean, it's only when we do something or a country does something really stupid, like let's say when ex-President Jacob Zuma appointed Des van Rooyen as finance minister, then the currency falls, but that's because foreign investors immediately sell the currency or any buying just dries up. So it's in events like that where the rand acts outside the range of other currencies, but generally it follows external stimuli, and it's very difficult to manipulate.
So currency returns, I mean, how do those affect the economy? I mean, if you're, obviously, if you're playing around and manipulating the exchange rate, that would have an impact on the currency returns.
Quite correct. So effectively, if for whatever reason, and generally we've been doing very well, our government, in terms of our policies to cause a bad economic outcome, which has been inflationary. But let's say inflation causes the rand to weaken, because that's generally what the currency reacts to, or our government issues more debt, and more debt means that there are more rands in circulation, which makes the rand worth less in the eyes of foreign investors. Then if the currency then falls, that generally means that, let's say, the price of oil and petrol and imports become more expensive. So effectively the consumer pays then more for petrol, it pays more for bread, it pays more for anything that is imported or used to manufacture goods in South Africa. So you're right, a weakening currency is very bad for the consumer. A strengthening currency, obviously the opposite, and a strengthening currency obviously also brings inflation down, and which then allows the central bank to lower interest rates. And that's why our Reserve Bank has its mandate to protect the value of the currency. And bear in mind that they obviously also involved in the rand market to where it's necessary. Well, they won't try and influence the currency longer term, but to steer it if it is necessary, just if there is extreme volatility.
So in terms of what then the Competition Commission is saying and how difficult that is going to be to prove, is that in some instances there was even an agreement, so to speak, around those who were participating to say, all right, we will not sell to these customers, we'll let you trade with these customers and we will hold off. Is that considered manipulation in itself?
Definitely. I mean, so most probably what happens, let's just think of an example when Barclays invested in Absa, they bought a stake in Absa, or conversely, when they sold that stake in Absa, then there is a very large payment that has to be made in rands, or conversely, the other way around, back in pounds. That is a very large payment, and so the banks that are assigned to do that payment will try and get the best rate for their client. And what I've read in other such cases overseas, then the trader will phone the trader at the other bank, because there's always obviously there's a buyer and a seller, and they've got to agree on a price, and say, I would like to have this price for my client, and then the two talk on the phone or via email or WhatsApp, and that is illegal. And that is what the Reserve Bank, the Competition Commission, is investigating, because that doesn't allow the free market to operate. So I think in many of these cases it will involve a large transaction where 2 or 3 or 4 traders at different banks were trying to get the best rate for their client, and in doing that colluded.
Does it constitute cartel conduct, which, according to our competition regime, is criminal conduct? And so there's this call for prosecution.
Absolutely. And the only pity is it's obviously now a long time ago. I think generally these cases were 2011, 2013, so it's 10, 12 years ago. In the case of, I think, Standard Chartered and also Citi have also admitted a few years ago the employees or the traders that were in the employ that did the offences have left the bank and they cannot be sanctioned anymore. So then it becomes the Competition Commission who's got to individually pursue those traders if they want to take them to jail, but they are not working at the banks anymore because of the length of time that's passed.
All right, Kokkie Kooyman, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on, Director and Portfolio Manager at Denker Capital.